Hello, writers. Come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my channel, Write with Michaela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is story time and the day of our chapter exchange. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then send your chapters with written permission to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video and in the description below. I'm looking forward to reading your chapters. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. This story is PG-13, so if you are under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is in its rough draft stage, just as the last two stories we heard. The title of this story is Elloni's Pride, and today we are reading chapter 19 out of book 1. If you would like to read along, then send to the email I stated earlier and request a PDF of the chapter or any script that you would like a PDF of. Just send to the email, request it, and I will get to that. Make sure you are specific about what you would like. Now, let's start. Elloni's Pride, Book 1, Breaking Point. This is Chapter 19, Life or Death Decisions. Browser came to the river. He looked back over his shoulder and said, "You know, a bath would be really nice right now." "I agree," thought Dronsnight. "Let's fly over first so you can lay your armor on the ground." "Yes, let's do that." It was closer to a jump or hop for Dronsnight to cross once Browser mounted. Then Browser undressed and headed into the river for a swim. He had no soap or rags, but he could rub off a little dirt. He debated about washing his long underwear, but then he would have to let it dry. Dronsnight also went into the river to soak. Then he leaned his head down for some long gulps. As a water dragon, he had extra places within him to hold water, so he needed to fill those places in his body with water. Both relaxed like the old days and nearly forgot their imprisonment. Unfortunately, there were still places on their bodies from the chains and cuffs, so they couldn't forget yet. Broman tripped on his dragon's tail because Hagar had stopped. Broman looked ahead and saw an open meadow. He looked to his right and he saw trees spread south. Then slightly to the left and ahead, the trees continued on. "Me no know what to do," thought Hagar. "The sun lead me out of the trees. I like trees. They taste nice. I no like trees in my nose." Bradley stopped when he got Hagar's thoughts, and he looked ahead. Then he looked back. The dark gray clouds of smoke weren't as thick now, but they could still see the grayness and smell the smoke. He looked at the tree lines. "We'll move over to our left a little and to stay in the trees. But if we're at the edge and the woods catch on fire, we can get out quickly." "Too bad you're not a water dragon, Hagar." No one could see anyone, so Bradley dropped his charm. Once Broman could see, he looked at Hagar and said, "I think that would be a good idea. Can you breathe water instead of fire? Then I could wash my face instead of you burning it." "I no mean to hurt you. I trying to help." "Just move over that way to stay in the trees," stated Bradley. "I'm not going to cast the charm for now, but I'm going to teach you boys the words so you can make yourself invisible." He glanced at Coulter, or not seeable. "And not smellable," stated Broman. Then he leaned his nose down to his arm. "Yeah, I smell pretty badly. my parents wouldn't let me in the house right now. But I'm sure those dogs could smell us. When you were in the woods before, started Bradley, did you use your nose? Yeah, replied Broman. You use everything. Sometimes the moon wasn't so bright. I mean, I usually only went out after the soldiers left and the moon was full. But I went out other times. Those boars. Yeah, boars, that's the word. Those aren't something you want to run into. I don't want the dogs to smell me, stated Coulter. He held up his arm. Can you smell me? Broman glanced at Bradley and then leaned down to smell Coulter's arm. Ah, yeah. My parents wouldn't let you in either, so you need to learn Bradley's words so you're not smellable. Bradley perked up. He realized that Broman was using Coulter's want to get him to learn. He used to dislike it when his pa did the same thing to him, once he realized what was going on. But he knew that was a motivation to learn and do. They moved to their left a little, which was north, and then Hagar continued walking east. He looked up, and the sun was almost overhead. Is the sun at its zenith? Zenith? You mean zenith? Asked Bradley. He looked up. Almost. It'll be there in an hour or so. The boys followed after Hagar, and Bradley started teaching the words once again. He noticed that Coulter was repeating the words now, and some words he repeated 2 or 3 times as he worked at pronouncing the funny-sounding words. Hector's group froze as they heard the sound that they had been dreading. The dog's bark chilled them to the bone. Orston. No, that's not right, stated Vixie. Ortonste. Yes, that's it. Ortonste is the ability to hear, hearing. I can't believe I left my family, said Hector. Why did I do that? Your wife and pa had the opportunity to join us, stated Sharman. You didn't leave them. And you sent my boys out to stop Trenton from returning, stated Lomar. We need to add Ortonste to the charm, stated Vixie, as she added it herself. And she intended it to go over Sharman's children. And the additional words worked, so no one could hear her or Sharman's 2 small children. But the group didn't realize that yet. Hector was looking around to see the path they walked, but no one could see him looking. That's right, stated Hector. We need to stop Trenton from returning. But we veered away from the village. Sharman didn't hear Vixie say that she would carry his little girl, but he felt her reaching for her. So he released her and just held his son. He reached out his hand out and grabbed Vixie's elbow now to keep her connected. We can turn south from here, stated Sharman, as he looked up to find the sun, which was mostly overhead. Trenton had more children than just him and your other 4, so we do need to stop him from returning to the village. Sharman started walking as close to south as he could estimate, and since everyone still had hands to join them together, they all headed south with him. Vralin, who was Trasta's and Trissy's father, felt Hector tug them back towards the village, and he agreed that they should just head south from this point. So he said, Hector, your boy Trenton has a head on his shoulders. Once he saw the dragons land, he would have known not to return. No, my boy would have come straight back, stated Hector, but he was following along now instead of pulling towards the village. He wouldn't want his ma to die because he wasn't there. Hector, said Sharman, we were all going to die if we stayed. There were people missing already, and we don't know where they were, so the soldiers would have just killed us. Trenton is smart enough to figure that out. Now, I'm not going so far to say that Trenton wouldn't have returned, but surely, once he saw the dragons, Once he saw the dragons, he knew not to return. Vixie was nodding her head and verbally agreeing, but no one saw or heard her. That's when Vixie knew the added words worked. That was my line of thinking, stated Fraulein. Trenton would know he couldn't save you, his ma, or his grandpa, so he would try to save all the children. Trosta and Trissy couldn't go to the pond on their own. They needed Trenton to go, and now they need Trenton to survive. Yeah, but, started Hector. Supposing that Trenton didn't head back once he saw the dragons, where would he go? Across the pond, for starters, stated Sassy, Fraulein's wife. If we go there, then we can pick up their trail. Right, Fraulein? You can find their trail? Fraulein shrugged, but no one saw him. I guess, but I don't know. Then the barking seemed louder and closer, so they stopped talking. Several times they looked around to see if they saw the dogs coming for them, but they didn't. Still, they could hardly breathe. Vixie was rubbing on Charmin's little girl to calm her, but no one heard her cries. Charmin could feel Vixie trying to hold the child, and he knew that Monty, his 2-year-old daughter, was scared. He thought Vixie was doing an excellent job of keeping her quiet, but he didn't think on it too long, since Monty and Talta were friends and played together when they got a chance to play in the village. So he just thought that Monty was used to Vixie and Vixie was used to her. Browser lay sprawled out in the grass. He had washed the long underwear after all, because he didn't want to put it back on as it was. Now he was waiting for it to dry. I see a little through the trees, thought Dronsnide. The meadow is just there. Do you think we can fly over that meadow? Browser rolled up to his elbow and reached out his hand to see if the long underwear was dry. And since it was in a sunny spot, it was mostly dry. I wish I had a map. We used to fly everywhere. Have you seen or felt any dragons near us? I see smoke in the direction of the kingdom and the village, thought Dronsnide, but there shouldn't be anyone there, unless the king sent someone back for something. I also see smoke coming towards us from the southwest. You can do invisibility, and we can fly. Then we would see more. Browser pushed up to his knees and stood and then started dressing. The long underwear didn't take long, but he still couldn't put the armor on easily, so that would take some time. You know, I would really like some clothes. I would just love to fly to another kingdom and get some clothes. What would you barter with? Thought Dronsnide. My good looks and charm? Stated Browser sarcastically. I don't know. I have no hunting gear. I have a sword, but you don't hunt with that. Imagine a sword fight with a bear. No, thank you, he sighed. I need to find Bradley anyway. Then Bradley and I can fly to the other kingdoms. After he had the armor securely fastened and they exited the woods to their west, Browser mounted and they flew out. For now they flew invisibly and low and south. They landed shortly after, just before the next set of trees. They probably only saved a day or so of walking, but Dronsnide knew Browser was getting anxious, and the short flight might calm him some. And it did. A smith went in to see King Damantade, and after he had the king's attention, he said, "A soldier gave me orders this morning to replace several things. I went to the training area to see what materials we had, or if I needed someone to go to the woods for wood or the mines for metal. Your instructions said replace, but I found everything on my list. So, did you want additional swords and practice dummies and everything else on the list? I'm just asking to clarify. Did someone already make these items that the soldier told me were missing this morning? The king looked strangely at the smith. Then he looked at the scribe that followed behind the smith. I wrote what I heard, said the scribe. I asked for the soldier to repeat everything. The king held out his hand. Let me see the list. The scribe nervously handed it over. Mostly he drew symbols because he had never had a teacher, and a teacher never taught him to read letters. The king saw a rough picture of a sword and a ball and chain and several other things that were recognizable. Right away, he realized that very few had permission to learn to read, but he had never seen this scribe's writing. He did remember testing the scribe by making a statement, and several days later having the scribe read the statement to him. He checked it against what his personal scribe had written, and it matched close enough. He handed back the page. King Damantade motioned to the smith. Lead the way. Show me these things that my soldiers said this morning Browser had taken when he escaped. The smith headed out the door with his scribe close behind him. King Damantade followed along, and as a few soldiers saw him, they also followed. When they reached the sparring area, and after the smith showed him several things in place, the king turned to the few soldiers and asked, Was this the equipment that was reported missing this morning? Yes, I believe it is, replied the soldier nervously. Then Browser must be here, stated the king. Lock down the castle and call the soldiers back. We will search every nook and cranny of this place and double the guards around me. Then he looked at the smith and the scribe and he pointed at them. You must stay with me until I have sufficient guards. Yes, sir, said the smith. The scribe was very wary, but he nodded his head. Trenton and the other children heard the dogs, and they glanced back over their shoulder, but they didn't see each other looking. Then Trenton looked to the side, and he could see the grasses moving, although he couldn't see the children. Hold up, he called. I'm assuming no smell works as well as no sight, but we're leaving tracks. Any ideas? Bark feet, said Coulter. Once we get in the trees, we can tie bark to our shoes. Trenton thought about that, and he was about to say that they didn't want to leave any tracks. But before he said anything, Aldemnia said, To tie on bark, we would need some of this long grass. I'll pick some for me and my sisters, but don't leave me. Trenton looked north. Pick for everyone. Was that you, Aldemnia? Pick for everyone and drop your charm for now. I'll watch north, and so will Moloch and Davald and Benton, and we won't leave you. I'll help you, said Clary. Me too, I'll help, said Kyla. How many? Asked Aldemnia. 15 and 9, said Trenton, so 24 times 2 feet. If we did 25 times 2, we would have extra in case any breaks, put in Aldemnia. That's 50 between 3 gatherings, so round up to 17 each. That will actually give us 51, an odd number. But I'm not hoping any break in pairs. Get long ones so we can tie on any size foot. The 3 girls quickly pulled 17 strands each of the long grass. Then everyone connected again before the girls said the charm for the protection. Connected again before the girl said the charm for protection against sight, injury, and smell. We won't stop in the woods until we see some bark we can get easily, stated Trenton. And we should get bark for those walking first, put in Martin. Agreed, stated Trenton. Before they reached the woods, they could hear horns blowing, and they weren't sure what they meant. But then the sounds of dogs seemed to be getting quieter. Then they reached the woods, and the little ones spotted some berries. They dropped their charms. And as they did, the older children's hearts pounded in their chests. But Trenton thought they needed to rest the charm. So they stayed visible, smellable, and injury-able for now. Trenton organized the boys to post watch, some to watch north, and some for snakes. And Aldimnia organized the girls to pick berries, some to hold out their aprons and others to pick berries for everyone. Thilda stopped and pointed. "Look, mushrooms! I haven't seen those since I was a girl." She looked at Sylvie. "Do you know anything about mushrooms? I remember some are poisonous." Sylvie sighed. "I remember some are very poisonous, but I'm not sure I can identify them." She walked to where Thilda pointed, and she squatted down. Suddenly, Lithia ran over and reached down to pick one. Sylvie quickly grabbed her up. She stood up and backed away. She hugged Lithia to herself. "Sweetie, we have to make sure these won't hurt us." "Mercy, protection, blessings," started Hoshman. "Oh, universe, I wish for you to watch over me and keep me safe." Thilda looked at her husband. "We've been learning words, and we've seen how our words are casting charms," he said as he thought. "Just now, I realized what the words to the prayer meant. So there have to be words. Keep me safe is the end of the prayer. Surely there is something we can use." He looked at Kala. "You see the dust. So maybe if we ask the universe if the mushrooms are safe, and Kala can see the dust." "You know," started Kosher, "I think we need to think directly with the universe. We have too many questions to keep asking Bradley." He looked at Hoshman. "I'm not trying to be disrespectful. We asked Bradley, and Bradley asked Browser, or who's the witch? Soflin? I mean, we can try to cast charms on those people also, but they may or may not know. And that's worked for us, so long as we could wait for answers. But Trenton, well, his group, they needed answers right away." Hoshman nodded. "I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure how to think directly with the universe. We know the word, so maybe we just insert it instead of a name." "But the universe," started Sylvie. She motioned with one hand. "The universe includes all of us. I wouldn't think you would want to think or receive thoughts from all of us at once. You already told us that at the meeting people kept thinking one at a time." She looked nervously at Kosher. She knew he had always been decisive, and even more so these last few days. But she didn't want him to decide to think with the universe. Meditation, stated Thilda. "That's how they used to do it. My grandmother used meditation to connect with the universe. She would go deep within herself, and the universe would give her answers. It's not as fast," she motioned to Kosher, "as you want answers. You have to totally relax. I did it a few times, but living in the village under King Damantane made it too hard to relax. So I stopped practicing a long time ago." Hoshman glanced around the group. "Kempton and Corton, watch the little ones and don't let them near the mushrooms. The rest of us will sit down, and Thilda, you teach us how to meditate. Maybe we don't meditate enough to know about the mushrooms and we pass them, but maybe we learn something." Kempton pulled the pine cone out of his pocket and asked the little ones if they wanted to play ball. Then he and Corton went away from the mushrooms to start their game. Lithia wiggled down and ran to her brother Kempton. The adults and older children sat down, and Thilda explained meditation from what she remembered. Hector's group could hardly breathe when they heard the horn, and suddenly dogs and soldiers started running out of the village. Some soldiers quickly mounted dragons and took to the skies, but the rest ran behind their dogs. The noise from the barking dogs and the clanging the armor was near unbearable. They squeezed each other's hands and held their breath. There was pain in their chest. Simon's two little children squeezed the neck of the person holding them, and Lomar's two sons wrapped their arms around a parent's leg. So Lomar and his wife both felt tied up. They watched in horror as the soldiers left. All they could think was the sound was a signal. The soldiers all understood, and they didn't. And even though they saw the soldiers leaving, they could not make themselves relax for quite some time later. Browser was walking with a funny gait, and Drumsnide watched for a while. Finally he thought, did you get hurt somehow or somewhere? Did you get hurt swimming? Browser pushed his eyebrows together as he looked back at his drink. No? Why? You're walking funny, thought Drumsnide. The underwear was still damp, and it's sticking to me in weird ways. I keep trying to adjust it, but I can't exactly grab it because of the armor. But I can't twist my body either to get it in the right place. Do you want to stop? Thought Drumsnide. No. Yes. No. I don't know. It's taking all my concentration, and now you're asking me about my underwear. I asked if you were hurt, thought Drumsnide. To my memory, there's a large meadow with a pond ahead. Do you want to fix your clothes there or here in the woods? Probably here in the woods, stated Browser. And then he began taking off the armor once again. Drumsnide observed Browser. Excuse me. It looks like all your twisting made matters worse. Oh, ha, ha, said Browser. I'd like to see you walk with crooked scales. This was worse than having a hair wrapped around your finger or your arm, because then I could just pull the hair off and toss it. But I want to wear the clothes. Browser took off the long underwear and hung it on a tree branch. Then he found a piece of armor to sit on while he waited. He wished he had some food of some kind, but he didn't. Then he saw Drumsnide grab some leaves and eat. Where are my bananas? Asked Browser. You ate them all? Thought Drumsnide. At first you were trying to save one for Bradley, but that didn't happen. Maybe you'll find some more. Browser sighed. Maybe, he said. Ooh, what is that? He got up and walked over to a short tree. He found hazelnuts. Hey, Drumsnide, come here so I can read some of these nuts. Oh, and look at that bark over there on the ground. That will be a perfect shallow bowl that I can carry a stash of nuts in. Since I don't have a pouch, I really need to get to a kingdom and get some supplies. I could help with some chore to get some supplies. You think the different kingdoms have the same supplies? Most likely, thought Drumsnide. I imagine they all have the same basic needs. Maybe one kingdom has more rabbit and one more duck. You eat those things, right? Right, said Browser, as he climbed up to reach some nuts. But I was talking pouches and water pouches and belts and shirts and a bowl. A real bowl. Maybe a pot. You know, the stuff I used to have before King Damantade captured us. I had 2 or 3 sets of clothes. Maybe one set was nicer than the other 2, but I left my clothes on that soldier, which did me no good. You don't know that, thought Drumsnide. They may have noticed you were gone sooner. I mean, do they really know what each soldier looks like when they go around with their helmets on? Well, when they eat, they probably take their helmets off, stated Browser. Once he had enough nuts, he got down, gathered them, and used the bark to carry them. He would set about cracking them and eating them when they rested again. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 19. We have one more chapter to read from this book. Of course, the story continues through 2 more books. I have been writing on book 5 of my Miacha's series. I've added over 11,000 words to that so far. I'm hoping to finish book 5 before we finish reading books 2 and 3 of Elloni's Pride. Leave a comment on how you feel wearing wet clothes. Maybe you got caught in the rain, or maybe you put your clothes over a swimsuit. Did your clothes stick to you in a weird way? This just adds some humor to this story. You see where they're going, but you have a little humor to lighten things up a bit. Leave a comment on if you eat mushrooms, and if you've ever had a class on gathering wild mushrooms. Some indeed are very poisonous. My friend says there are two mushrooms that look very much alike. And one is poisonous and the other's not. One's edible, healthy, whatever. One's poisonous. And she's looked at them. She's looked at the veins and the underside and she knows all the terminologies for these mushrooms. She can't tell these two apart. And she is a very detail-oriented person. So I don't advise picking wild mushrooms unless you are with a guide or an expert or something. So, of course, we do mushrooms from the store, and somebody's already told us those were okay. So, but leave a comment on if you eat mushrooms or anything like that. Or if you hunt, you go with the groups to harvest wild mushrooms. Sounds like fun. My friend has a lot of fun. Leave a comment on if you had left the village with Hector's group, how you would feel when you heard the dogs barking. You're invisible, you're walking away, but here the dogs are coming. Would you have been rooted to your spot? It's like so filled with fear that you couldn't move. Or how would you feel when the horn blew and the soldiers and dogs suddenly left the village? Would that be scary for you? Or would at that moment would you be like, oh, they're leaving? So how would you feel? Would you still be scared when you heard the horn and you didn't know what it meant? Or would you see them leaving and just kind of take your breath and relax because they were leaving and you had more time to get away? So, now, here's another fun thing. Also, leave a comment on what you would think if you were King Damantade when all the equipment was back. His soldiers said Browser took the things. So he automatically assumed Browser returned the things. And never once did he think there might be another possibility. My readers know what happened. And you, my viewers, know what happened. The tailors, they shrunk the things, took them and showed Libya, and then they shrunk them and they brought them back. Well, we know what happened. So we can laugh a little at King Damontate's, he's just automatically accusing Browser. But I want your comment to be as if you didn't know. If you didn't know about the tailors doing that. If you were King Damontate, I want to know what you would think if you had been King Damontate. What you would think about the stuff suddenly being back. Would you blame Browser? Would you think your soldiers had too much ale to drink? What would you think? Join me Tuesday for us to look at a little jargon, or more precisely at comparing and contrasting things. We will also look at comparative and superlative things. So that'll be fun. Join me Friday for Chapter 20 of Elloni's Pride, Book 1, Breaking Point. Chapter 20 is our last chapter in this book. Not in the story, but in this book. It's the last chapter. So, visit my website, www.bymckella.com, or just bymckella.com. It should work both ways. And read some character bios. If you read some, then leave a comment on which ones you've read. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and the bell so we can continue to write together. And other people will have a higher chance of finding this video and this channel, so we can have more people join our community, and we won't be writing alone in a closet. We can all come together and we can share our stories and our ideas and stuff, and We can help people to not look at their blank pages so they can be like, oh, I've got writer's block. No, come join us. Get your friends to join us. So hit the like, subscribe so we get more people. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Michaela with Write with Michaela. Bye for now.